Welcome everyone. This video will cover 112 points regarding the story of Jeffrey Epstein. The video will cover 99% of what has happened in regards to Epstein's pedophile network starting in the late 80s and go through to November 23rd, 2025 when I stopped updating this script. I will not only tell you the story of Jeffrey Epstein, but I will make a number of arguments and a few speculations as well. Please be aware that the contents within this story can be graphic. We will be diving deep into the subjects of sexual assault, human trafficking, suicide, homicide, drug abuse, and mental illness. All of which will be served with a side of strong language, so use your own discretion. Section 1. Epstein's death and facility details. The first two sections will serve as a brief overview into what has happened regarding Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, when he died, and in 2025 when the cover-up has come into full view, so I can build momentum with some quick points. In this section, we're going to go over everything that went wrong inside of the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, leading up to and on the day of Jeffrey Epstein's death. I will cover some things I think most people know about at this point, especially if you've been following the story of Jeffrey Epstein since 2019, but I will quantify them so that they give a better perspective on just how screwed up this whole situation really was. I will also cover some aspects which are quite shocking that I have not heard talked about. So let's get into it. Point number 1, 9 inoperable cameras. You probably knew that the cameras in the area where Epstein was being held were not working during the time that he died. But did you know that there were a total of 11 cameras in that area which could have captured people moving in and out of the special housing unit, and that out of the 11 cameras, 9 of them weren't working? Somehow, only 2 out of the 11 cameras were operational during the time of Epstein's death. And did you know that this malfunction had begun almost 2 weeks prior to Epstein's death on July 29th, and that it affected over half of all the cameras in the entire building? Apparently, the system did have a repair scheduled for August 9th, the day before Epstein died, but the officer who was supposed to escort the technician through the facility was coming up on the end of his shift, so I guess he couldn't for some reason. I'm sure that was just a silly scheduling error that no one had planned out on purpose. I'm sure within those 2 weeks, they didn't notice that no one would actually be able to escort this technician to where he needed to go. All of this is why I love this video. Check this out.
I was like, man, that guy killed himself. There's just no way that you could have run an op and had people go into that cell and not have any video of it and not have any people come out and say, hey, yeah, I saw that guy. He shouldn't have been there, the guard or this guy.
It looks like Cash forgot that more than half the cameras in the whole facility weren't working, and also that the guards were asleep, and also a bunch of other shit that we will get into. Point number 2. How long were the guards asleep? The guards on duty were asleep during the time Epstein was murdered, but this was no 20-minute nap. Guards Tova Noel and Michael Thomas were both simultaneously asleep for a whopping 3 hours. At this time, protocol required at least one of them to check in on Epstein every 30 minutes, but it looks like that didn't happen. At the same time, the cameras also weren't working. Point number 3. How long was Epstein left unchecked? While these guards were asleep for around 3 hours, it's actually the case that neither one of them performed a routine check-in on Epstein for a total of 8 hours, and that both of them decided to falsify their check-in logs. This release from the United States Attorney's Office of Southern New York states, quote, to conceal their failure to perform their duties, Noel and Thomas repeatedly signed false certifications attesting to having conducted multiple counts of inmates that they did not do, unquote. So, asleep or not, for some reason, they both simply decided not to check up on Epstein, not for 3 hours, but for 8 hours. The last check-in was at approximately 10:40 p.m. on August 9th, and they found Epstein dead at approximately 6:30 a.m. the following morning on August 10th. Point number 4. The guards were let off the hook. Both guards were charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States government and falsifying official records. But almost 2 years later, in May of 2021, they were both granted a deferred prosecution agreement by a federal judge who dropped all felony charges and replaced these serious charges with a simple 100 hours of community service and an agreement to provide, quote, truthful information related to their employment by the Bureau of Prisons about the events and circumstances described in the indictment, unquote. Well, now that's a sweet deal, ain't it? Maybe someday the government will share their information with us, the general public. Point number 5. Placed in a cell with a violent murderer. About a month before Epstein was removed from this mortal plane, he was placed in a cell with a quadruple homicide, torturer, strangler, steroid meatball named Nicholas Tartaglione, a guy who had tortured and strangled someone to death with a zip tie while he made others watch. Quite the pick for a cellmate, if I do say myself. Shortly after being placed in a cell with Tartaglione, there was an incident which resulted in bruising around Epstein's neck, kind of like the ones on his body after they found him dead, only non-fatal. Now, let's take a closer look at this incident, because if you ask me, I think Tartaglione was actually the first attempt on Epstein's life. Listen to this. This is from the Office of the Inspector General's report. Quote, on July 23rd at 1:27 a.m., correctional officers responded to Epstein's special housing unit cell where they found Epstein with an orange cloth around his neck. Tartaglione told officers Epstein tried to hang himself. Medical staff examined Epstein, observed friction marks and superficial reddening around his neck and on his knee, and placed him on suicide watch, unquote. But wait, there's more. If we scroll further down into the document, we find yet another account of this incident with even more detail. It says, quote, at approximately 1:27 a.m., special housing unit staff hears noises coming from Epstein's cell. Epstein's cellmate, the murderer, says that Epstein has attempted to hang himself. Special housing unit staff observes Epstein lying on the floor with a piece of orange cloth around his neck. Epstein initially tells MCC New York staff that his cellmate tried to kill him. Epstein's cellmate, the murderer, tells MCC New York staff that while he was asleep, he felt something hit his legs, and when he turned on the light, he saw Epstein with a string around his neck and called the guards, unquote. Okay, so Epstein did initially say that Tartaglione tried to kill him, according to the official Inspector General's report. And apparently, CBS also conducted over a dozen interviews with people who had met Epstein before and after this incident, who were told the same thing by Epstein, that he had been attacked by his cellmate, that his bunkie had tried to kill him, that Tartaglione had previously said things that made Epstein feel threatened. But I'm sure Epstein's torturer, strangler, murderer cellmate was an honest chap. I'm sure he was so concerned with Epstein's well-being and was simply trying to save him. I'm sure he would never try to hurt a convicted pedophile. Point number 6. Footage of the Tartaglione incident somehow deleted. As if it wasn't bad enough that Tartaglione likely tried to kill Epstein, listen to this. Due to the fact that Tartaglione was already in trouble for strangling and murdering people, his attorney actually ended up requesting the footage of the special housing unit on the day of the incident with Epstein, because there's a bunch of cameras in there. This attorney, who was representing Nicholas Tartaglione, was initially told by prosecutors that they had found the footage and would willingly hand it over. But not long after that, prosecutors returned empty-handed and said that it had been deleted due to a clerical or technical error. So now we have two separate occasions where technical errors have prevented us from seeing important moments regarding Epstein in the special housing unit. They said they had it, then they said it got deleted. What are the fucking odds? Point number 7. Replacement inmate moved the day before Epstein's death. After Tartaglione was removed from the situation a week after the incident where he definitely didn't try to strangle Epstein and instead helped Epstein get medical care from prison staff, they put Epstein in a cell with a prisoner named Epstein Reyes, who was assisting the government with a drug case at the time. We will be revisiting Epstein later, as he is now dead from what I will call improbable circumstances, but he was only with Epstein from July 30th to August 9th. And he was removed the day before Epstein was found dead on August 10th. Apparently, they relocated this Epstein guy to an entirely different detention center called the Queens Detention Center, which is also in New York. But yeah, it was the very next day that Epstein was found dead. So allow me to sum up the last 3 points, because this is getting fucking ridiculous already. Here's what I see when it comes to Epstein's cellmates. They put him in with Tartaglione. Tartaglione was very likely supposed to kill Epstein, but there was too much commotion in the process when Tartaglione tried to do it, and the assassination was botched. They ruled the incident an attempted suicide in order to cover the failed murder. They gave Epstein a new roommate to give credibility to his high-risk suicidal status. Then, after 6 days, they declared Epstein non-suicidal, because something about being in jail cured his clinical depression. And then they removed Epstein's new roommate the day prior to Epstein's death. But we don't get to see the footage from July 23rd, when Epstein supposedly tried to kill himself. Apparently, it was mishandled and ended up deleted, and as I'll get to later on, we are still missing 2 minutes and 53 seconds from the night of Epstein's death from the video we were given. Come on, man, it doesn't get any more obvious than this. Point number 8, the stick. Here's an interesting point about the facility. Apparently, it is common for guards who are doing their regular check-ins to come across prisoners who are in the process of trying to unalive themselves. It is so common that they actually have something called the stick, which is basically a stick with a knife at the end of it that they use to quickly cut various kinds of makeshift nooses made by prisoners so they can save the prisoners from their own despair. But since our boy Epstein had enough dirt to bury a ton of powerful people, he didn't qualify for the stick treatment. He didn't even qualify for 30-minute check-ins. I guess he qualified for the bronze tier level of security, which only includes a check-in every 8 hours. Man, what a shame. He had so much money and he still couldn't buy himself better treatment. But yeah, the fact that they have a tool specifically designed for cutting nooses tells you just how frequently this happens. It tells us just how serious of an issue this really is. And I feel like it provides that much more contrast to all the failures which aligned on the night of Epstein's death. When suicide attempts are this common, the guards should have been held responsible for not doing their rounds for 8 hours and then lying about it on their reports. But for some reason, they weren't. Point number 9, Epstein's optimistic outlook. Just a few days before his death, Epstein denied any thought of ending his life, actually stating that he believed he was living a, quote, wonderful life, unquote. Epstein appeared as though he was very hopeful, and with everything he knew, he had many legal avenues he could pursue. In fact, one of Epstein's lawyers is on record saying, quote, "From the times I met him and deposed him and sat in mediations with him, he never, ever struck me as someone who questioned whether he had done anything wrong," unquote. And, quote, "He always felt, this is something I got to go through. I'll be out of here in a flash. It's not a big deal," unquote. Then added, quote, "So it was rather surprising to me when he died in jail," unquote. It is no doubt that this upbeat and hopeful behavior is far removed from many dejected and hopeless prisoners who don't have anywhere near the kind of power Epstein knew that he had. This very much pushes me even further from the idea that Epstein was suicidal, because he did wield immense power through money and through blackmail. Epstein knew that the hell he was enduring wouldn't last, but we can see that there was simply too much evidence against him to let him go. I think this put some very powerful people between a rock and a hard place, and something had to give. Point number 10, the makeshift noose. This bedsheet was found as the makeshift noose Epstein supposedly used to hang himself. According to the Correctional Center's Special Housing Unit protocols, this bedsheet should have never, ever been in this part of the facility. Epstein was only very recently taken off of suicide watch and was still considered in a place of high risk by the staff. That's actually what this part of the facility is for, inmates who are considered to be at a high risk for harming themselves. Not only was this type of linen not supposed to be in the area, but look at this. The end point of this fabric is hemmed, which is basically just when you fold the fabric and sew it to itself. This means that the end point was at the edge of the fabric when the strip was produced. This allows us to distinguish the fact that this noose was never cut or torn, which is what you may expect to happen when you find someone hanging themselves. It would be the fastest way to get them down. Otherwise, you're fighting against the tension of a whole human body as you try to untie the knot. In the Office of the Inspector General report, we were told that the guard who found Epstein and freed him from the noose, Michael Thomas, quote, "ripped the orange string from the bunk bed," unquote. So does this mean he put more tension on it by pulling it until it snapped? I also highly doubt, with Epstein's entire body weight producing tension within the knot, that Michael was able to untie it. So unless they sewed the end of this makeshift noose after Epstein hung himself with it, I have serious doubts that this noose was responsible for Epstein's death. This concludes section 1. It really is surprising just how much went wrong all at the exact same time. We're told that most of the cameras were inoperable, that Epstein's cellmate tried to kill him, and yet he spent another week with Tartaglione before Efrain Reyes replaced him, that Epstein had a positive outlook and believed he was living a wonderful life, that suicides are so common in this detention facility that they have a special tool specifically designed to cut makeshift nooses. Yet, they didn't check on Epstein for 8 consecutive hours, when they should have checked on him 16 times during that period. Nothing about this fits a narrative where Epstein took his own life, and there will be more aspects to this event within the Metropolitan Correctional Center discussed throughout the video, such as prison logs and the phone call Epstein made just before his death. I didn't put them here simply to avoid repeating myself. Section 2. The involvement of Trump's administration. Now we will quickly run through what has happened in 2025 and leading up to 2025, as Donald Trump and his administration have now thrown even more fuel on the fire of Jeffrey Epstein. We won't cover everything in this point, just what has happened with this administration that has launched the story of Jeffrey Epstein back into the spotlight. And I have to say, Trump and his administration are probably the largest component of the Epstein story. But before we go any further, I want to express that I am not a Republican or a Democrat. I am a moderate, and after what I have learned through making this video, I am now of the belief that both parties are playing for the same team. This section will be largely chronological and will not cover Trump personally, as I have a point dedicated to him later in the video, but it will be about him as our president and his administration specifically. Point number 11. Trump implicates others' involvement with Epstein. Just a few months before Trump announced he would be running for president in 2015, he attended the Conservative Political Action Conference, otherwise known as CPAC. Now, CPAC is basically just a big stage for Republican leaders, rising stars, and presidential hopefuls to showcase their platforms, test out campaign messages, and generally energize the conservative base. But during this conference, Trump is on camera confidently and publicly implicating 2 other people in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. The first person he implicated was former President Bill Clinton. Take a look.
Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
And the second person he implicated was Prince Andrew.
Of Jeffrey Epstein in your remarks about in the Q&A.
Well, I think he's got a problem. I mean,
what do you think the problem will be?
I don't know, but that island was really a cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew. He'll tell you about it.
So we can see at the very beginning of his political engagement, this issue was at the forefront of Trump's mind. And just so you know, neither Bill Clinton nor Prince Andrew ever sought any kind of restitution for defamatory claims against Trump for these comments. And I just find that a little odd, because if somebody accused me of being implicated in the pedophile ring of Jeffrey Epstein, I'd probably sue them. Wouldn't you? Point number 12. Trump's uncertainty about releasing the files. During Trump's 2024 campaign, Trump stated that he would declassify the 9/11 files, as well as the JFK files, but began to show what you might call a lack of interest when asked about releasing the Epstein files.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah,
Would you declassify JFK files?
yeah.
Would you,
I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
I don't understand. Is he saying that all the evidence the government collected about the Epstein situation is phony? He says he would at first, but then backtracks, saying, quote, "I don't want to affect people's lives with the phony stuff," unquote. Could we get a statement from him about exactly what phony stuff he was talking about and whose life would be affected by it? I want to point out that he has signed an executive order which released the JFK files, but no such action has been taken by him yet to release the 9/11 files. Trump also went on to Lex Friedman's podcast where he was asked about releasing the client list, and kind of said that he would, still with some level of hesitation.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you're able to, you'll be...
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it.
Trump says he will take a look at it, seemingly unsure about how much conviction he wants to put behind the statement. Trump then decides to say this.
But yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
He still doesn't sound very enthusiastic, if you ask me, but ultimately, to the question of whether or not he would release the Epstein client list, he says he would be inclined to do so. So, what's changed? Point number 13, Kash Patel's change of heart. When Trump got into office, he appointed a few people who were pretty gung-ho about getting the truth out about Epstein. The first person I will cover appointed by Trump who was very, very hungry for the truth regarding this Epstein case is Kash Patel, who has since been appointed as the director of the FBI. Prior to being appointed, Kash Patel went on a conservative podcast hosted by Benny Johnson and said the following.
Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. You don't think that Bill Gates is lobbying Congress night and day to prevent the disclosure of that list? And why is it that the Senate, and good for Senator Blackburn to try to get it out, but then Dick Durbin comes over the top and says, no, we're not going to release the names. I don't care about the list itself, but if you release the names, right? What the hell are the House Republicans doing? They have the majority. You can't get the list? You're going to accept Dick Durbin's word or whoever that guy is as to who is on that list and who isn't, and that it can and can't be released?
And also, during a Senate confirmation hearing for his nomination as FBI director, Kash Patel said this.
So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past and how we are going to countermand missing children and exploited children going forward.
But after 5 months in his position, Kash Patel had suddenly done a complete 180-degree turn on this issue. This is what he had to say on Joe Rogan's podcast.
I'm
How much can you talk about what you've seen?
Not yet. Just what I've told you.
Can you say you've seen anything?
No, that's the point, that there's nothing in there, like in the video. You guys will be bored.
You talking about the video of the murder or the suicide? The suicide. But what about the video from the island?
Oh, sorry. So you're talking about two different things. So
sorry.
So again, we're going to give you everything we can, and people have to remember, we're not going to re-victimize women. We're not going to put that shit back out there.
Now isn't that interesting? Point number 14, Pam Bondi's deceit. Now let's take a look at who Trump appointed to the position of Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who lied about having the files, later claiming that she meant to say something else entirely. Take a look.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Okay.
She clearly knew he was asking about the Epstein client list, but after a couple months when we still had heard nothing about it, this is how Bondi and Trump both reacted to a question at a press briefing about the Epstein client list.
Like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day.
Bondi attempts to convince all of us how she was supposedly talking about all kinds of different files pertaining to a number of different declassification projects, even though she was specifically asked about the Epstein client list in her interview with Fox News. This, to me, is obvious deceit, and is just the first of many examples of what you may call manipulation or doublespeak that we will cover in this video. Point number 15, Dan Bongino's about face. The last appointee I'll talk about here is Dan Bongino. Bongino, prior to appointment as Deputy Director of the FBI, directly beneath Kash Patel, was ravenous for the truth regarding Epstein's clients as well as Epstein's death. Here is a couple segments from Bongino's own podcast before becoming Deputy Director.
That Jeffrey Epstein may have been using his private plane and his island with a series of video cameras, eyes in the sky, Joe, to record people doing things they shouldn't have been doing. Because, Joe, he may have been working with foreign intelligence services, and part of that work may have been getting some of these people on tape doing really bad things. Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
But after becoming deputy director, his attitude shifted completely. The same as Kash Patel and the same as Pam Bondi, as we see in these two clips.
There is nothing in the file at this point on the Epstein case, and there's going to be a disclosure on this coming shortly. We are working through there is video. That is something the public does not.
There's video of him killing himself.
No, not the actual act, but the entire MCC Bay, it was only one camera. There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release, that's what's taken a while on this, we are working on cleaning it up to make sure you have an enhanced, and we're going to give the original so you don't think there were any shenanigans. You're going to see there's no one there but him. Right. There's just nobody there. So I say to people all the time, if you have a tip, let us know. But there's no DNA, there's no audio, there's no fingerprints, there's no suspects, there's no accomplices, there's no tips, there is nothing. He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Man, is it just me, or is he absolutely bugging out here? He actually looks like he is in pain saying this shit. Just look at his eyes. Point number 16. The new sentiment: nobody cares. In the last few months, the FBI and DOJ have released 11 hours of edited footage. They've told everyone that there is no client list, and they released something called the Phase 1 documents. And rightfully so, everyone got pissed. So the Trump administration tried swapping from a proactive stance to one of indifference. This is what Trump said in a press conference when a reporter asked Pam Bondi where the client list was.
Yeah, sure.
Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Personally, this tone shift from Trump really pissed me off, considering how big of a deal this case is to myself and most other people. For me, this is the moment when I knew something was completely wrong, and I got the feeling that we were going to have to fight for the release of this information. Directly after this incident, Trump wrote this Truth Social post in another attempt to draw attention off the subject, saying, quote, "Again, forget about the Epstein files. Focus on Mexicans and flooding," unquote. And later that week, Trump would go on to write this Truth Social post, shaming the rest of his supporters who were still asking questions, saying at the bottom, quote, "Let's not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about," unquote. Which I recall not going over well with the public. And by the way, I will be talking about the Special Housing Unit video in detail in Section 6. Point number 17, drama in the White House. At some point between the catastrophic release of the Special Housing Unit videotapes and the public outrage which ensued due to the lack of interest clearly being shown by Trump and the FBI, we saw a bizarre falling out between these appointees. Instead of a unified public announcement to address the situation, we saw tension and upset within the White House. According to NBC and other sources, Bongino was actually considering resignation and didn't show up to work for a number of days, as he and Kash Patel were fighting with Pam Bondi about the handling of this evidence. And I am still wondering why there was so much drama behind the scenes if they are telling us the truth. It just doesn't really make sense. Point number 18, the newer sentiment, Democrat hoax. After another week or so of public outrage for treating this issue as if nobody cared about it, Trump pivoted into yet another stance. that it was a massive hoax perpetrated by none other than the Democrats. He tried lumping it in with things like the Steele dossier, the lying 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and the Russiagate hoax, officially naming it the, quote, Jeffrey Epstein scam, unquote. During this time, Trump was also arguing that if there was anything in the files that could hurt him or the MAGA movement, the Democrats would have used it already. Gee, I wonder if maybe, possibly, perhaps they didn't, because some of them would be implicated by it too. This would be like using a grenade to kill your enemy while you're locked in a small room with them. Because as we will discuss further into the video, there are many Democrats implicated as well. The blowback would potentially wipe them out too. So no, they wouldn't use these files to hurt him or the MAGA movement or anything. They want to keep these files completely out of the public view. Point number 19, Nothing Burger number 1. A few days after blaming the Democrats, Trump also made the decision to unseal the grand jury transcripts from Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking case that put Ghislaine in prison back in 2021. The problem with this is that U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer rejected the Trump administration's request to unseal the Ghislaine Maxwell grand jury transcripts. He said, quote, "The materials do not identify any person other than Epstein and Maxwell as having had sexual contact with a minor. They do not discuss or identify any client of Epstein's or Maxwell's. They do not reveal any heretofore unknown means or methods of Epstein's or Maxwell's crimes," unquote. In other words, there is nothing new in this testimony that we would want that we don't already have. Personally, I would rather have Trump release all the evidence collected from Epstein's properties. I would rather have the full-length interview videos from the prison guards and other inmates who were in the special housing unit. I would rather have the full-length interview videos from the prison guards and other inmates who were in the special housing unit with Epstein, especially Tartaglione, his former cellmate. I would rather have the real, raw, unedited video of the special housing unit a week before and after Epstein's death. There is a lot of evidence I would want before Ghislaine's grand jury testimony, which we already have most of anyways. To me, this really looked like an attempt to satisfy the public without actually giving them anything to grab onto. A pretty pathetic manipulation. Point number 20, Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell. As pressure continued to build, Trump sent Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell at the Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, Florida. Between July 24th and 25th, Blanche and Maxwell met for over 9 hours. After her meeting with Blanche on the first day, Maxwell was seen carrying a box full of unidentified contents as she was re-entering the facility. No official statement has been given as to what was inside this box she was carrying. Additionally, there is a transcript of the entire interview, and the interview was audio recorded as well. I will include the link to that in the description of the video. One interesting moment from this transcript is a point where Ghislaine Maxwell states that some of the people who would hang out with Epstein were in the Republican Party's cabinet, some of whom were actually Todd's co-workers. But instead of asking Ghislaine Maxwell to name these people or any kind of follow-up question about why they were hanging out with Epstein, if not for sexual favors as she put it, Todd Blanche completely changes the subject in the next line, opting instead to inquire about the last massage Ghislaine had been present to with Epstein, a completely irrelevant question given the statement Ghislaine had just made. Reading this makes me feel as though there was no real intent in Todd Blanche to get any kind of real truth, that this meeting served some other purpose unknown to us. Point number 21, Ghislaine's transfer. I want to make sure I point out that Ghislaine is no longer incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution, but instead, for reasons still unknown, she was transferred to Federal Prison Camp Bryan, also called FPC Bryan, which according to Wikipedia is a minimum security prison for female inmates designed to hold short-term offenders with average sentences of 5 years or less. So, not people like Ghislaine Maxwell, who have 20-year felony sentences. When Trump was asked whether he knew about this transfer or not in a recent press conference, he had this to say.
Two questions for you. One, were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department?
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
And do you believe that she is
It's not a very uncommon thing.
Do you believe that she's credible to be listening to? Your Deputy Attorney General said.
So he's claiming he knew nothing about it and that it's not uncommon for someone who is a convicted sex trafficker with a 20-year prison sentence to be placed in a minimum security facility which normally houses inmates with sentences of 5 years or less. Okay. There is no way he didn't know about this transfer, and we will be getting into some of the details of Ghislaine's stay at this minimum security prison because she is being treated like a princess and it is fucking weird. So don't worry, that part's coming up. Point number 22, secret Epstein meetings. So the first half of this next point is a bit hard to follow because it's really fucking confusing, but I will do my best. I want to bring up this weird ordeal, something about a secret Epstein meeting hosted by J.D. Vance. On August 6th, 2025, CNN reported that there would be a meeting that day between Vance and Trump appointees regarding the management of the Epstein scandal. I found this in CNN's transcripts for that broadcast on their website, where their anchor named Jessica Dean said, quote, J.D. Vance is hosting a meeting to discuss the best way to handle the ongoing Epstein scandal, unquote. Fox News also released this article the same day, talking about an upcoming meeting that would take place at Vance's vice presidential residence between Vance, Pam Bondi, and Kash Patel. Then, later that same day, Vance denied any plan for a meeting of that kind when asked about it during a press meeting. Watch this.
And it's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation. And I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax.
So he outright denies it and implies that the CNN reporter needs better sources. But then, later that day, Fox News sets up a camera outside the vice presidential residence and reports this.
So Vance invited Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche to dinner at the 12-acre vice presidential residence there in Northwest Washington.
Except CNN reported the next day that the meeting had happened and was moved from the vice president's house to the White House instead. Whiplash much? Stick with me here. 2 days later, on August 10th, J.D. Vance was then asked about the meeting in an interview conducted by Fox News reporter Maria Bartiromo, where he responded with this.
Can you give us some clarity on this meeting that is reportedly happening or happened last night at the White House about the Epstein files and how you're communicating the Epstein story?
So I've seen so many different fake reports about this, so let me set the record straight. There was no meeting at my house last night. There just wasn't.
Was there a meeting at the White House?
We did meet at the White House yesterday, but not at the time that they said that we were going to meet, and not about the subject that they said that we were going to meet about.
So either Vance was lying about the meeting to discuss the Epstein dumpster fire, which is a massive red flag, or both CNN and Fox News are lying for the typical media reasons, which is just another case of crying wolf that works against the truth. I'll leave it up to you guys, though, to decide what really happened with this one. All I know is that either Vance or the media was lying to our faces. Now, let's also talk about the secret meeting between Colorado Representative Lauren Boebert and Donald Trump on November 12th, 2025. First of all, I need to provide some context for why this meeting happened. This meeting happened because two representatives, who we will talk about later on, named Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, established a petition within the House of Representatives to force the House to vote on a bill that they created. This bill is called a single-issue bill because it just focuses on one single issue, the release of all the Epstein files. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie had begun collecting signatures on this petition because House leadership, such as Majority Leader Mike Johnson, have absolutely refused to bring this bill up for a vote in the House. Now, since the start of the petition process, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have been just a few votes short. That is until the state of Arizona's 7th district elected a woman named Adelita Grijalva as their representative. It took forever for Grijalva to be sworn in, which I will be talking all about later in this video, but she had promised even before winning the election to be the final required signature on this petition to force the vote of the release of the Epstein files in the House. Which brings us back to Lauren Boebert now, who was one of only 4 Republicans who has signed the petition. Lauren was selected for this secret meeting likely because she is the least outspoken about her criticisms of what looks like a cover-up. The other 3, who are Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, who is running the petition, and Nancy Mace, have all very publicly expressed how discontent and disgusted they are with the lack of transparency. So Trump decided to pull Lauren Boebert into what is called the Situation Room, which is a very secure underground area of the White House that is typically only used for national security situations, such as the Bin Laden raid or Operation Midnight Hammer. According to Trump's press secretary Caroline Leavitt, this is what transparency looks like. It looks like having a secret meeting in an underground room that is completely cut off from the rest of the world. I think she left that part out when describing how they met with Lauren Boebert for the sake of transparency. Here is the video where Caroline Leavitt is lying to our fucking faces.
Transparency, Caroline, why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency? Doesn't that show the level of transparency when we are willing to sit down with members of Congress and address their concerns? That's a defining factor of transparency. Having discussions with members of Congress about various issues, and I'm not going to detail conversations that took place in the Situation Room, in the press briefing room.
I swear, all these press secretaries do is lie to our faces all day long like sycophantic cheerleaders. This person is nothing but a professional liar. Honestly, whoever raised this piece of shit, you did a horrible job. You should be ashamed of this creature you put out into the world. But anyways, none of the people involved are giving the public any details about it. Trump even told Republican House representatives to vote against the release of the files. And I actually find this to be extremely disturbing, because I have a very long point dedicated to Trump, which is point number 88 if you want to skip ahead, and I was absolutely shocked. I was horrified how much shit was going on with not just him and Epstein, but also with just his own sexual misconduct. Given that fact, and the fact that they did acknowledge that this secret meeting was about Epstein, which took place in this highly secure room at the White House, normally used for matters of national security, and that no one will tell us the details, yeah, yikes guys, we may actually have a problem. We might actually have a pedophile president. This brings us to the end of section 2. I am absolutely convinced this is a cover-up at this point, and I know for a fact that Donald Trump has a huge role in this story. While this is looking really, really bad for Trump and his administration, it's very important to remember that there are many more people who I will discuss later on that were also majorly involved in Epstein's network, and that there are also many more people who are now involved in covering it up. There are more people that funded Epstein, people that enabled Epstein to move his money, and therefore his power all around the world. People that stayed silent, knowing what Epstein was doing, that were in positions to stop him immediately, but never did. The evil spreads as far as it does deep on this one, which is very far and very deep, unfortunately. So I implore you all to keep pushing on this issue, because if I have come to realize anything while researching this video, it's that this Epstein ordeal is not like other controversies. It is growing like a goddamn wildfire every day. I think people are actually going to go to prison this time. Seriously, I think Epstein was just the first domino in a long line of miserable, evil assholes who are all about to see what accountability feels like for what is likely the first time in their entire lives.